Michael Turner locked the door of his empty apartment for the last time. After losing his job, his savings, and eventually his house, he had only one thing left that truly mattered: his 8-year-old daughter, Sophie. Every promise he made to her centered on one simple belief: no matter how difficult life became, they would face it together. Just months earlier, Michael had been a respected operations manager at one of Seattle's largest food companies. His CEO, Richard Collins, blamed him for a failed project without investigating the truth. Despite years of loyal service, Michael was fired in front of his coworkers. Humiliated but determined, he refused to let bitterness define his future. Unable to find another management position, Michael accepted temporary jobs wherever he could. One afternoon, while delivering supplies through a quiet neighborhood, he noticed an abandoned bakery with dusty windows and a faded for sale sign. Something about the little building reminded him of happy childhood mornings spent baking bread with his grandmother. Using the last of his severance pay and a small loan from a community credit union, Michael purchased the neglected bakery. Friends called the decision reckless, but Sophie smiled as they cleaned broken shelves together. "This place feels warm already," she whispered. Her faith gave Michael the courage to begin again. The first weeks were painfully difficult. The old ovens constantly broke down, customers were few, and bills arrived faster than profits. Every morning before sunrise, Michael mixed dough by hand, while Sophie completed homework in a corner booth before school. Slowly, neighbors noticed the aroma of fresh bread and homemade cinnamon rolls filling the streets. Michael treated every customer like family. If an elderly neighbor couldn't afford breakfast, he quietly added an extra loaf to the bag. Local teachers received free coffee before work, and firefighters were welcomed with fresh pastries after overnight shifts. Kindness became the bakery's most valuable ingredient, and word spread throughout the city. Within a year, Turner's Bakery became one of Seattle's favorite neighborhood businesses. Long lines formed every weekend. Local newspapers praised the bakery's homemade recipes, and online reviews celebrated Michael's generosity. The little shop that everyone expected to fail had become a symbol of hope, proving that compassion could build a stronger business than greed. One rainy afternoon, the front door opened, and Michael looked up from the counter. Standing there in an expensive suit was Richard Collins, the CEO who had fired him. Richard had no idea who owned the bakery. He had simply stopped by after hearing people rave about the city's best fresh bread. Their eyes met instantly. Richard froze with embarrassment as recognition crossed his face. Michael greeted him politely, just as he welcomed every customer. Richard lowered his head and admitted that losing Michael had been the company's greatest mistake. After the real cause of the failed project was uncovered, the board realized Michael had been blamed unfairly. Richard explained that the company had suffered declining morale, poor leadership, and the resignation of several talented employees. He offered Michael an executive position with an impressive salary, hoping he would return and help rebuild the business. The offer promised wealth, prestige, and everything Michael had lost. Michael looked around his busy bakery, where neighbors laughed over coffee and Sophie happily served warm cookies to waiting customers. He smiled gently before replying, "I already have the life I prayed for. I don't need a bigger office. I need to keep doing work that brings people together." Richard quietly nodded, understanding the lesson. Before leaving, Richard sincerely apologized for judging Michael too quickly. Michael accepted the apology without anger, believing forgiveness was more valuable than revenge. As Richard walked away carrying a warm loaf of bread, he realized success wasn't measured by titles or profits, but by the lives touched through honesty and kindness. That evening, Michael closed the bakery beside Sophie as the sun disappeared behind the Seattle skyline. She hugged him tightly and asked if he missed his old job. Michael smiled and shook his head. Sometimes losing everything clears the path to something even better. Together they switched off the lights, grateful that hope had risen higher than any loaf they had ever baked.